My name is Dr. Claire Hartman. I'm 47 years old, a cardiothoracic surgeon living in Charlotte, North Carolina. And before you scroll past, before you think, oh, just another doctor's story, let me tell you this. My life wasn't built out of success. It was built out of ashes, out of a fire so cruel it nearly consumed me. Because I didn't always live like this, with my name stitched in blue thread on a white coat and patients looking at me with reverence. There was a time when I was just Claire, a young woman with her whole world tied to a man's smile and the soft breath of a baby boy who didn't get to stay. I can still see that night like it's tattooed behind my eyelids. The rain hammering against the windshield. The hospital bag sitting in the back seat, unopened. My husband, Daniel, joking nervously as he drove us through the storm. We never made it. The crash wasn't even our fault. A drunk driver ran a red light, and in one snap of sound and metal, the two people I loved most were ripped from me. Daniel died instantly. Our son, well, he lived just long enough for me to hold him, hear his tiny cry, and then feel his warmth leave me. I remember screaming, clawing at the nurse's sleeve, begging God, begging anyone to give me back what was mine. But there was nothing. Nothing but a silence so heavy, I thought it would kill me too. If you've ever lost everything at once, you know. You stop being human for a while. You become a shadow that just moves from one day to the next, not really living. People told me, Claire, you're strong, or time heals. But those are just words people throw at you because they're afraid of your grief. And I won't lie, there were nights I thought about ending it. I'd sit in the dark apartment we were supposed to raise our son in, holding the little socks I never got to put on his feet, and I'd think, what's the point? But I didn't end it. Instead, I made a promise. If I couldn't save the two people who meant everything to me, then maybe, just maybe, I could save someone else's. That promise became the fuel that drove me. I buried myself in medical school. I worked double rotations, skipped meals, stayed up 48 hours straight sometimes. People whispered that I was obsessive. They weren't wrong. But grief will do that to you. It sharpens into a blade, and you either cut yourself open with it or you learn to wield it. If you've ever carried a loss that reshaped you or turned pain into something that fueled you, go ahead and hit the like button. It helps me know these stories are reaching the people who need to hear them. And if you want to walk with me through the rest of this journey, make sure you're subscribed because trust me, what came later, no one saw it coming. By the time I was 38, I had become one of the top cardiothoracic surgeons in the Southeast. That's not arrogance, it's survival. Surgery became the only place I felt steady. In the OR, under the cold lights with the steady beep of monitors, I didn't feel like a widow or a broken mother. I felt like someone with purpose. Still, life outside those hospital walls? Well, let's just say it was empty. Family gatherings, well, let's just say they weren't kind. My parents thought I had buried myself in work to avoid moving on. My sister once told me I was selfish, that I chose career over finding another husband while my eggs dried up. I never told her about the mornings I'd throw up before rounds, not from sickness, but from the smell of baby powder in the hospital nursery as I passed it. No one understood, and honestly, I stopped trying to make them. Then came the day everything shifted. It was an ordinary Tuesday. The kind of day where the cafeteria coffee tastes like mud and you don't even complain because it's just background noise to the chaos. I was scrubbing in for a pediatric case, a delicate, high-risk procedure on a little boy with a congenital heart defect. His chart said he was 6 years old, frail but bright-eyed. His chances weren't great, but if anyone could give him a fighting shot, it was me. I was reviewing the scans when the OR doors opened. A nurse whispered, "His grandmother's here. She insists on speaking to the surgeon before we take him in." Annoyance flickered. I didn't have time for hand-holding, but when I looked up, my whole body went cold. Standing there, in the surgical gown we give to visiting family, was a face I hadn't seen in decades. A face that dragged me straight back to my own childhood, to a part of my life I had locked away like a box in the attic you never open. It was her, the woman who once looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't worth the dirt on her shoes. The woman whose cruelty had left scars no scalpel could cut out. And now, she was here, begging me, without even knowing it, to save her grandson's life. My breath hitched. My gloved hands trembled just slightly, so slight I prayed no one noticed. She hadn't recognized me yet. To her, she was just Dr. Hartman. But to me, she was the ghost of every humiliation, every wound that had shaped me long before the accident that killed Daniel and our son. I wanted to speak, to tell her who I was, to ask her if she remembered the little girl she dismissed, the young woman she mocked, the one she said would never amount to anything. But my throat closed, my chest tightened, and all I could do was stand there, frozen, staring at her. The nurse glanced between us, oblivious. "Doctor, should I—" I forced myself to nod, to keep the mask on. "Yes, tell her I'll speak with her shortly. We need to prep the boy first." And then I turned back to the surgical table, but inside my mind was spinning. Memories clawed their way to the surface, shouted words, slammed doors, the sting of being unwanted. Things I had buried under years of training in white coats. Now they stood in front of me, demanding to be faced. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just another surgery. This wasn't just another day in the OR. This was something else, something bigger. Because fate had placed me in a position I never imagined, holding the literal heart of her grandson in my hands. And for the first time in years, I didn't just feel like a surgeon. I felt like a woman standing on the edge of a choice that could rewrite everything. And as I looked through the glass at that boy, fragile and unaware, one question burned in my chest, hot and heavy. Do I save him? Or do I let history finally pay its debt? I wish I could tell you that I walked into that surgery and kept my hands steady, that the years of training and discipline locked me into focus like they always did, but that would be a lie. Because when the scrub nurse tied the strings at the back of my gown and I caught another glimpse of the boy's grandmother through the glass, my chest squeezed like a fist was inside it. She still hadn't recognized me. To her, I was just another surgeon, maybe even one she thought she could manipulate. She had no idea she was standing across from the girl she once told would never be anything but white trash with a big mouth. Her voice echoed in my head as I pulled on my gloves. I could hear her like she was in the room again, back in that small North Carolina town where I grew up. She was my step-grandmother, Lillian, my father's second wife's mother, a woman whose disdain for me was as sharp as broken glass. When I was 12, my mother had just died. My father remarried too quickly, at least that's how it felt to me. His new wife, Sharon, came with her own baggage, a controlling mother who despised anything that wasn't hers. That was Lillian. I'll never forget the first time I met her. She looked me over like she was inspecting a bruise on a piece of fruit. Then she smiled, not kindly, but the way a cat does when it knows the mouse has nowhere to run. "She's scrawny," she told Sharon right in front of me, "and stubborn. That one will never make it far." Those words stuck like burrs under my skin. And it didn't stop there. She found ways to chip at me every chance she got. When I came home with honor roll ribbons, she scoffed. "Book smarts don't make a lady. Men don't marry trophies. They marry women who know their place." When I worked extra shifts in high school to save for college, she sneered, "Waste of time. You'll end up barefoot with a kid on your hip like every other fool." I used to go to bed at night clenching my fists under the pillow, promising myself I would prove her wrong. But the night Daniel and my son died, her words came back to haunt me. Barefoot, with a kid on your hip. Except in my case, I didn't even get to keep the child. For years, it felt like she had spoken a curse over me. So now, here she was, Gray hair tucked neatly under the surgical cap, still pearls around her neck like she wouldn't dare face the world without them. Same sharp jawline, same lips pressed thin with superiority. And fate had delivered her grandson's heart into my hands. "Doctor?" The anesthesiologist's voice cut through my storm. "Vitals steady. Are you ready to begin?" I forced my voice steady. "Yes. Let's proceed." Once the scalpel was in my hand, muscle memory took over. Every movement was precise, controlled. I opened her chest cavity, exposing the tiny heart struggling to beat. The boy's body was small, almost bird-like under the drape. He was innocent. He hadn't asked for any of this. And that's what made the storm inside me worse. Because my revenge wasn't against him, it was against her. And yet the line blurred. His survival was her survival. His death would be her punishment. Somewhere around the 2-hour mark, I felt the shift in the room. The nurse at my side cleared her throat gently. "Doctor, the grandmother is asking again to speak with you. She says it's urgent." My heart skipped. I kept my eyes on the surgical field. "Tell her she'll have to wait." But when I finally stepped out later, peeling off gloves and mask, there she was, waiting like a vulture. "Dr. Hartman," she said, her voice smoother than I remembered, like age had sanded down some of the edges. But it still carried that same command, as if the world was supposed to bow when she spoke. "Yes," I said carefully. Her eyes searched mine. Nothing. Not a flicker of recognition. "My grandson, how is he?" "He's stable. The procedure went as expected." Relief washed over her face. For a split second, she looked human. Then she pressed on. "I need to thank you personally. You've done what few could. You've given me back my family." Family. The word tasted bitter in my mouth. I should have walked away. I should have let her live in her ignorance, but something in me cracked open. "Lillian," I said softly. "Excuse me? You don't remember me, do you?" "Claire Hartman. You knew me as Claire Dawson, back in Linwood." The color drained from her face. Her mouth parted, then closed again. She studied me, disbelief flickering into something else. Recognition. "Oh my, you're her daughter?" "My mother's daughter, the one you said would never be anything." Silence stretched. Nurses bustled past, but in that moment, it was just us. Two ghosts from a past I'd tried to bury colliding in the sterile hallway of a children's hospital. Lillian's face hardened. Not remorse, not apology, just that same cold superiority. "Well, I suppose I was wrong," she said finally. "You've made something of yourself." Something in her tone twisted the knife, as if my entire life, my grief, my sacrifices, were nothing but a rebuttal to her insult. "You ruined me," I whispered. "Long before the accident, you broke me down piece by piece. And now, fate puts your grandson in my hands." She leaned in closer, lowering her voice. "Then you should consider yourself lucky, Claire. Lucky that the girl I dismissed became the woman who could save him. Isn't that a kind of victory?" Victory. That word rattled around in my skull all night. I couldn't sleep. I paced my apartment, replaying her smirk, her tone, her lack of any real regret. It wasn't victory, it was mockery. She thought she had won again, twisting even my success into her narrative. The next day, I checked on the boy in recovery. He was pale but alive, clutching a small stuffed bear. His eyes fluttered open, and for a second, he smiled at me, pure, untouched by his grandmother's poison. And that's when I realized my revenge couldn't be as simple as letting him die. No, that would have made me the villain. It would have made me into her. No, my revenge would have to be deeper, cleaner, something that didn't touch the boy, but stripped her of the thing she prized most, her control, her image, her power. Later that afternoon, Lillian cornered me outside the recovery wing. "Dr. Hartman," she said, the pearls around her neck catching the fluorescent light.
I want to make a generous donation to the hospital in your honor. After all, you've done the impossible for our family." Her family. That word again. And in that moment, a plan began to form. One that would unravel her carefully curated world one thread at a time. But I didn't say that to her. Instead, I smiled. Just enough to make her believe I'd swallowed her praise. "That's very generous, Mrs. Grant," I said. Her eyes flickered, maybe surprised I hadn't called her Lillian again, maybe relieved. She had no idea. That night, I opened an old shoebox in the back of my closet. Letters, journals, memories of the girl I once was, the one she tried to destroy. I flipped through the pages, each one a wound I had documented in shaky handwriting. And I thought, if she wants to parade herself as a saintly grandmother, let's see how she fares when the truth comes out. Because I knew things. I remembered things. And people forget. Children don't always stay silent forever. As I tucked the box back under the bed, my phone buzzed with a message from the hospital. The boy's condition had changed. Rapidly.
The message lit up my phone like a spark in the dark. Patient Grant, unstable vitals, possible complication, return immediately. I threw on my coat and raced back through the hospital halls, my pulse hammering in my ears. Every step echoed with one thought. Not him. Please, not the boy. When I reached the recovery wing, chaos was already unraveling. Nurses swarmed, machines beeped frantically, and the boy's tiny chest rose and fell unevenly. His face was pale, lips tinged blue. "He's going into cardiac tamponade," the resident blurted. "Fluid around the heart. We need to reopen, fast." In that moment, time slowed. My hands remembered what to do even before my brain caught up. Within minutes, we were back in the OR, sterile lights blazing down as if fate itself wanted to spotlight my next move. And just like before, she was there, Lillian, watching from behind the glass, her hand pressed against it, eyes wide with terror. For once, the mask of control had cracked. I focused on the boy, tiny, fragile, but still fighting. My scalpel cut, suction cleared the fluid, my fingers stitched with practiced precision. Slowly, his heart steadied. The beeping monitor leveled. Life returned to him. Relief washed over me like a tide. Not for her, for him. Because he was innocent. He didn't deserve to be the weapon in this war. But I also knew this was my moment. The one thing she feared more than losing control was losing her image. And I held in my hands the truth of who she really was. Hours later, after the boy stabilized and drifted back to sleep, I found her waiting in the family lounge. She jumped up as I walked in, pearls trembling at her throat. "Is he—" "He's alive," I said flatly. Tears sprang to her eyes. She clasped her hands together as if she might pray. Then she whispered, "Thank God. Thank you, Claire." I let her words hang in the air, heavy and sour. Then I stepped closer. "You don't get to thank me, not after everything you did." Her eyes darted, scanning the empty lounge. "Lower your voice." "There it is," I snapped. "Always worried about appearances. You treated me like dirt, Lillian. You told me I'd never be worth anything. You made a grieving child feel like garbage in their own home. And now you stand here acting like I should accept your gratitude?" She flinched, but her spine stiffened. "I was harsh, maybe, but it was for your own good. And look, you turned out successful. Doesn't that mean I was right?" I almost laughed, bitter, sharp. "No, I turned out successful in spite of you. not because of you, and the world deserves to know that." Her eyes narrowed. "You wouldn't dare. Think of my grandson. What will happen if you drag our family through the mud?" And that was her mistake. She thought she still held the power. A week later, the hospital hosted a donor gala, a glittering evening where board members and wealthy patrons toasted themselves for saving lives. Lillian was there, of course, dressed to the nines, grandson's story already polished into a fairy tale of perseverance. She was ready to parade him as proof of her legacy. What she didn't expect was me. When the chief of surgery handed me the microphone to speak about the case, I told the truth. Not the medical details, that was confidential, but the personal ones. I spoke about being a child dismissed, mocked, told I'd never amount to anything. I spoke about grief, about losing my husband and baby, about pouring myself into medicine as the only way to survive. And then I spoke about what it meant standing in that OR, looking through the glass and seeing a face from my past. I didn't say her name. I didn't have to. The hush that fell over the ballroom said enough. People glanced at her, pearls gleaming, face pale. She knew everyone understood. And then I finished with this. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't letting bitterness win. It's saving the life of someone they love, and doing it not because they deserve your mercy, but because you refuse to become them. The applause roared, not for me exactly, but for the truth, for the resilience. And in that sea of clapping hands, Lillian sat frozen, powerless. The fallout came fast. Her carefully constructed reputation cracked under whispers. The board declined her donation. The local paper ran a piece about my journey, framing it as triumph over adversity. She was reduced to silence, her control stripped away, not by cruelty, but by exposure. And the sweetest part? Her grandson adored me. He'd light up every time I checked in, clutching that bear, calling me Dr. Claire. In his eyes, I wasn't her enemy. I was the reason he could laugh again. That bond was untouchable. Months later, when he was strong enough to leave, he hugged me goodbye. "Thank you," he said softly. "Grandma says you're special." I knelt down to his level. "Don't listen to everything Grandma says, okay? Listen to yourself. You're stronger than you know." He grinned, gap-toothed and pure, and in that smile, I saw Daniel. I saw my son. I saw that grief doesn't erase love, it just reshapes it. As for me, I'm still here in Charlotte, still working impossible hours, still carrying the scars of loss. But I don't carry them like chains anymore. They've become armor. Because in the end, revenge didn't come from hurting her. It came from refusing to let her define me, from standing tall in the light while she shrank in the shadows of her own making. And that's the lesson I carry now. Sometimes the sweetest justice isn't destroying someone, it's living so fully, so loudly, that they can't ignore what they tried to erase. So, if you've listened this far, thank you. My story isn't about bitterness. It's about reclaiming power. And maybe it's about reminding anyone out there who ever was told they'd never be enough that you already are. Sometimes the best revenge is just becoming the person they swore you could never be. If you've ever carried a grudge that turned into strength, I want to hear it. Share your story in the comments, because your voice might be the one someone else needs to hear today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for more stories of justice, redemption, and the power of survival.